if they're down this path and they do want to instantly connect, then what's going to happen is it'll send an indication out to Slack, and we've got a small pod of SMEs who are able to have that conversation. So the bat phone kind of rings, and they could kind of they could click a button and be brought into an interface and have a conversation right then and there if they're ready for it. That doesn't exist. We had to orchestrate together a couple of different things. And like I said, if they don't want the conversation, well then cool. Let's kick them to a really nice customized Calendly and get them to book. But again, all hopefully with the honor of this is what they want. They want to be served this way.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
You can't do everything. So you essentially have to make some bets, for lack of a better word. What is going to have the biggest impact with your audience? Focus your energy and budget there to make the biggest splash you can. Okay, that's a boring way to say it, though. So I like how my next guest worded it in his podcast guest application. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories from throughout his career, is Clinton Bonner, the Vice President of Marketing for Launch by NTT Data. Thanks for joining us, Clinton.
Daniel, excited to be here. I love your intro. You get me fired up, man. So I'm ready to rock and roll. Good work.
Well, we got a bear here, so let's see what he's going to bring to us today. So I looking at Clinton's background real quick. He spent 12 years at Top Coder, where he had roles like VP of Digital and User Experience and VP of Marketing. For the past 2 years, he's been Vice President of Marketing for Launch by NTT Data. As the name suggests, Launch by NTT Data is owned by NTT, a publicly traded company. NTT's most recently reported annual revenue was over 13 trillion yen, which is roughly equal to $85 billion at current exchange rates. Clinton manages a team of 10 and a $5 to $10 million marketing budget. So Clinton, give us a sense. What's your day like as VP of Marketing?
Busy, right? And it's always that level of, well, define that a bit, right? I always want to talk to my team. I'm busy. Well, what do you mean? Is it good busy? Is it a rewarding busy? Are you doing activities that don't really amount to a lot busy? Let's discuss, right? So, but really for me, if I'm waking up, I'm getting to my calendar or even the night before, and I'm trying to set my day up, and not to be too didactic about it, but I really want to look at what's coming up that I have to prep for very well, and what are the meetings and conversations I'm planning for that are going to be value-led versus how much time am I blocking for tactical stuff? Can I take my Asana board and literally map it into my calendar so I could treat myself kindly with time? So that's a bit maybe boring for some, but I found it really effective because it does free me up to focus when I need to focus. So that's the start of my day, at least. And then I'm on a lot of calls. It is what it is. So a lot of my time are Zoom or team calls and a lot of collaboration. And so within Launch by NTT Data, we're a portfolio within NTT Data, which is then goes up to NTT, like you mentioned. So it's this big Russian doll system. There's a lot of cross-team collaboration and very often go-to-market strategies and orchestrations of what are enterprise-level campaigns.
I like that. I never thought of it that way. Treat yourself kindly. When it comes to your time. That's kind of really nice. Is one of the things to treat yourself kindly to, like, when you're booking meetings, when possible, give yourself like a 15-minute gap or something. Like, what do you mean by like treat yourself kindly? I like that.
Yeah, I've tried the 5-minute buffer tactic, and then it just has never worked. I mean, it's like that one to me has been like good in principle, right? And then if somebody books a 45-minute meeting, that's a sneaky way of they want an hour, right? So it's just that those things have been less than successful for me. But tactically, or philosophically, what I'm talking about treating myself kindly is enough time on my calendar to make sure that the high value things get the biggest blocks. And I don't just put like a 3-hour block and say focused work. I'll go back to my Asana board and be like, all right, how am I divvying that up? Are there things in half-hour chunks I can go do? Are there things in 90-minute chunks that I need that much time for, and I'll plop them on my calendar. And this way I can't stick, it doesn't stick all the time. But if I could be 80 to 90% around what I thought I should go do that day, I could close the laptop at a certain point. I used to coach Little League that my kids aged out, but whatever, go play pickleball, whatever, and do that in a way that's like, all right, I actually got through quite a bit of productive work today, high value work today. So that's what I mean by treating it kindly. Otherwise, you're spinning your wheels. You get done. It's 7 o'clock, it's 8 o'clock, and you still feel like you didn't get anything done. Can we curse in this podcast, or how's this work? Is it
I'll just tell Apple that it's explicit. I don't mind.
Gotcha. That's a shitty feeling.
The ghost of Steve Jobs might haunt you, but like Apple's very. So
I think he's got better things to do. But hey, Steve, I'm here. I'm in Connecticut. Come see me, bud.
Yeah, no, I really like that the way you're thinking with intention and treating yourself. I've never heard anyone talk about their schedule, especially a VP, before that they're going to treat themselves kindly. So I like that. But let's jump into now the meat of this. It's called How I Made It in Marketing. Sure. You look at the things you've made in marketing. Like I mentioned, I've never been a podiatrist or actuary or worked in any other industry, but I don't feel like they get to make things like we do. So let's take a look at some of the lessons from the things you made. Your first lesson was have great designers on your team. How'd you learn that?
Fairly quickly. So my time at Topcoder, that is a crowdsourcing platform that you could extend out to on-demand talent. And that talent is digital talent, coders, designers, algorithmists. So, and I started there when I was like 30 years old. I actually stumbled my way into that work. I flipped a golf cart. I was writing a movie, and I was getting good at using things like YouTube, and somebody I knew from my UConn days was like, hey, why don't you, we kind of need a marketer. I was a marketer. I wasn't even doing marketing in my eyes. I was trying to get a movie made. He's like, yeah, but we need someone to do some storytelling. I said, cool. So that's how I got into Topcoder. But then once you get around really good design talent, you recognize right away that, for me at least, it's been very, very true that when you go to do internal storytelling, and this is another thing, Daniel, like the more and more I've progressed my career, the more time and attention I have to spend on internal meetings, because I'm trying to win something. I'm trying to sell something that I believe in, whether that's a new website rendition or a new experience we're trying to tie together for our prospects or our clients. And if you can't easily communicate through beautiful visuals your intent, you might still win, but it's not very often. It is not very often. If you can get designers to help you take a sketch, because I still sketch, pen, paper, graph paper. Hey, I'm thinking about this. Get it into a designer's hands as rapidly as you can and get something visual to react to. Plus, the people you're collaborating with, it's highly more collaborative. They want to look at something and see it a step or two further that's real, and they can get their hands dirty a lot quicker on a visual than they can a Word doc. So that's some of it. And at the end of the day, you really want to have great design talent that can help you not just start something, but then finish with a lot of elegance and beauty. Like, we're doing things that we want to shine. We're operating brands. We're creating things that are either physical or digital that end up in people's hands or their hearts or both. And if it doesn't hit them and it's not visually compelling, well, good luck. You're not treating yourself very kindly, because you could have great guts and great intent. If it doesn't look the part, you're probably not going to get what you wanted.
Well, can you give us a specific example? Walk us through, like, what was something you designed? How did you work with the designer? And what was the result? Because, for example, when you talked about those internal meetings, I think you're using those design images in the internal meetings, which is a great thing. But I always think, taking a step back, I'm a writer. So when I've worked with designers, it's amazing how I will tell them something and it will seem obvious to me, but they think so differently. And so one thing I've learned in my career, and one thing I've written about before, is the design brief and the importance of the design brief and having a value proposition in there, so that it's all right there and they understand it, versus you have some quick conversation. They heard one thing, I was meaning another thing, and a totally third thing comes out. So can you take us through, like, what was something that that the designer built at the end of the day, and how did you work with them to get there?
Yeah, there's everything that my team goes and does is I have designers on my team. That's the other piece of this too, is get them on your team. If you can, Don't beg and borrow for designers. Don't have to go ask billable people to help you on Sundays with something. It just doesn't. They might have the best intentions. They're not focused on the work, and they are billable, so they're going to be pulled off into client work. So fight for having good design people that are yours, that you collaborate with day in, day out. And of course, you could extend through communities, extend through Upwork. It doesn't have to be an FTE. It's cool if it is, but there's plenty of ways to treat someone from Upwork just like an FTE when it comes to project by project work. That's another piece of it. To answer the question, I think I would flip it over to when my time at Top Coder. We ended up doing a documentary, and it was, I don't know, 15 or 18 minutes long. Beautiful documentary. It's out there. It's called The Passion Economy. And it was this concept. It hit just before COVID. So this is like, whatever, 2019, we're rolling this thing out. And I'm working with with a specific videographer who is also an editor and designer. And he's literally going around the globe and filming these different members of the Top Coder community. And we're stitching together a bit of a day in the life of what it means to be part of what is like the greater gig economy, because that was the platform that Top Coder is. And we really wanted to tie the human connection there, that these are people. These are really good, talented people that can be there for you on demand. And not only are they good at their job, but the type of work they're involved in provides them lots of freedoms, because they're working as someone in the gig economy. They're taking roles as they come to them and being very choosy with which ones they say yes to, which ones they say no to. A lot of freedom, a lot of like neo freedoms in that. And there's risk there, of course, from an individual perspective. But we were really looking at the documentary to portray it in a way that is, yes, it is risk, but there's a lot of reward there on an individual human level when you get in a really positive community, which again, at that point, working for Top Coder. But the work and the polish and every piece of that feels and looks beautiful and big. Right? Out punching, our weight class by a lot. And that's, to me, Daniel, like you could do it nowadays, right? Because the tool sets are there, and the collaboration suite is there. So make sure you have the right things. Make sure you have designers. Have a design system. So know what good and consistent feels and looks like. Apply to everything you're doing, even out to something as big as a 18-minute documentary. Understand what your brand, voice, and tone is, and have it throughout everything you're doing. And yeah, it all kind of coalesced and came together in this beautiful, beautiful documentary. It's one of the things we got done that was high design focused, really like high end brand focused. And we were able to pull it all the way through. And the design team that we were working with, the videographer was also a designer, and every element that we went to market with. So every piece that was the social presence or how it would show up internally, like in our Slack announcement, every bit of that was put through a design lens, and it was orchestrated in how we came to market. And it was a huge opening. I think the thing is, I don't know, maybe close to 100,000 views out there on YouTube, which for a fairly small company putting out a documentary about random crowdsourcing gig workers across the globe, not bad numbers.
Well, designer is one hat we have to wear as marketers, in a sense, a little bit. We work with our designers. You're saying product owner is another one that we should wear. So you said think, build, and scale like a product owner. So give us an example. How did you learn this? How did you do this?
Yeah. So this one is for me governs when I'm breaking down my calendar and I'm talking about high value things. I'm thinking through products and can we stitch together products in a way that get us to our end goals faster and more effectively. And so let me take you through a little bit of what do we mean by that, and then certainly can go into an example or two. I ran UX for a bit at my last few 18 months at Top Coder. So I had a chance to actually not only work with designers every single day, but UI, UX, and UX specialists on what experiences are we going to go research, understand, need improvement, put them up against each other and then make calls, strategy level calls on which ones we're doing first and why. So that's first and foremost. That's part of it. Like, what experiences can we go create as a marketer that typically would be expressed through the website? They might have other avenues and tentacles that go out to social, but for the most part, it's probably going to be website experiences. So thinking through what can you do, and then also really trying to think critically about what's a Goldilocks experience I could offer somebody. I always think of the childhood game Chutes and Ladders, and you've got a couple of different ways up the board. One of the ways is you hit that big ass ladder, the one that you really try. Was it 13 to 81, whatever that one is? We all could envision what that looks like. And the other way is you ticky-tack your way up the board and you hopefully avoid the chutes. And that's, a little parallel for life as well. Cool. So when we're looking at website journeys or from an advertisement onto website with personalization, with the ability to, let's say, book time with the right person or interface with the right SME instantly, because you're able to understand who they are based on, previous trips to your website. Remember, they downloaded something 3 months ago and the golden goose came back, and now you want to accelerate them into a conversation with the SME who wrote something. If that's a Goldilocks outcome you're really trying to create, well, guess what? There's not a single tool out there that does that yet. There's some cool things out there. There's what we're looking at. Is it okay to mention things by names that matter to you?
Please do. Yeah.
Okay,
The more specific, the better.
Yeah. We're looking at a tool called Qualified that ties into demand-based. They have a demand-based integration. Very awesome. So you can really understand who they are. And then you can either offer, of course, like personalized experiences based on something they either downloaded or what you think you're inferring from them. But then how do you take that a step further and say, well, you know what? I really want them to accelerate a conversation. I really want them to take right now because they're on your site or they've already downloaded something and they came back and they didn't answer the drip email. Of course you sent the drip email. You sent it. You probably don't have their phone number yet because, you can collect that, but I'd rather just get their information and get them in funnel and make sure the good content gets to them. And, I'm not asking for phone numbers typically on my forms. There's other ways to connect nowadays. And with that, can we accelerate that trip so that if they got a book that a SME put out and they're back and we know they're the right person, let's say they're like a VP of digital at Walmart, like, yeah, ding, ding, ding. We want to talk to that person. Then build a product. Think of that experience as a product where you could stitch a couple things together. Maybe it's Calendly, maybe it's these tools I'm mentioning earlier, and you create journeys that allow them to do the thing you're after. And also understand then, well, what if they don't take door number one? You have to think like a product owner. They don't want to take the immediate phone call, the immediate text with the SME, but they are willing to book time. All right, well, how do we route them to that next thing that's not quite Goldilocks, but still really good? They don't want time. Well, what's the next thing? What's the next level thing that's still value to them and value to us? And think through those, map them out as a product, and then go build pilots. They work, scale them.
Yeah. So as a product owner, let me ask you, how do you maybe you can give a specific example of one of these journeys you built. How do you understand what will serve the ideal customer, right? Because I like how you're talking about like a product. I've talked about a lot of content marketing like a product. Email marketing is a product. A blog post is a product. This podcast is a product. And you got to make sure it's serving that customer. Not just, I hear everything you're saying, but not just we're getting that lead from the VP of digital.
Right.
How do we serve them? So let me give you one quick example while you're thinking. I interviewed Michelle Huff, the Chief Marketing Officer of User Testing, on How I Made It in Marketing. One of her lessons was utilize customer empathy when trying to involve the customer in marketing efforts. And the way she does that, one of the ways she does that is in her all hands meetings, her marketing all hands, they always have a time where they have a customer empathy spotlight session when they're trying to show, hey, here's some data or information or what is it we have from the customer. Now, like, how can we use that to serve the customer, to just bring empathy in everything they're doing? You can get into some internal meetings and they can be cutthroat in hitting the Q3 numbers or whatever it is.
Sure.
So let me ask you, Clint, thinking like a customer, how do you, give me a specific example. What did you learn about a customer? How did you make sure you served them with that journey?
Yeah, well, I think we're in our world, we're dealing with we're dealing with, that's a horrible way to say it. Our clients
We're putting up
are,
with these people.
yeah, these people. So our clients are technologists, like CIOs, chief product officers, VPs of application, and they tend to be very busy and striated, extremely busy. Not that other people aren't, but these are folks that are running really large engineering teams or really large, it could be thousands of people. And so the way to treat them as kindly as we possibly can, I think, is two ways: is don't BS them. Don't give them that's a tone thing. If folks go to launch.nttdata.com, you'll see the tone's very, very purposeful. It is plain English. We detest MBA speak. Nobody actually talks that way. And if they do, nobody likes them. And then when it comes down to understanding what they're there for, it's about their kind of honoring their time. And the big piece of that is also for the hook is, can they talk to a SME instantly? Can they talk to not talk to a BDR? BDRs have a great role. BDRs they come to the site for the first time. They download one of our innovation book. How do you set that up for enterprise? Great. They don't take another action that we could realize. Okay, we're going to put them into the traditional funnel. We've got scripts. We're going to go back at them. We're going to work them, hopefully discover intent and bring them to a phone call, kind of tried and true. Okay, great. Have to do that also. But what if somebody came to the webinar and now we know they're back, as an example, right? And we know who they are, they're back, and they are the right person, kind of like, hey, the pearly gates open up. This is the right person we really want to accelerate conversations with, and we think they'll value it. Cool. Let's put them into this Goldilocks path that we've created and allow them to talk with the SME or book time with the SME as quickly as possible. Collapse that time frame so they don't have to have back and forth conversations with again, BDRs have a great role, but folks that really can't talk the talk. We need to build trust immediately, very, very quickly, at least as quickly as we can. How do you build trust in high technology? You get them talking with people that have done this for quite a while. And so we really try to collapse that time frame. And I think by doing so, kind of honor what they're after. And if they don't take the bait or they don't convert, well, that's okay. We offered it to them and we'll try to convert them on something else that we think is still valuable to them.
So I hear what you're saying, Clinton, and I think you're building a smart funnel. These are good funnels. I'm not saying there's anything wrong in what you're doing, but what I'm trying to get at is you should be a product owner. So how can you give me an example of something you learned about the customer and how you serve them with what you're building with this product, which is essentially lead gen product, right? Because when I think of a product, that is something that serves an ideal customer, right? And there's, history is littered with products that didn't actually serve someone and fall by the wayside, or products where, I don't know, if you're focus grouping, if you're A/B testing, if you're surveying, if you're user testing, watching them do that, but actually learning about the customer and to hear them tell you like, I want to get on with this SME faster. It makes sense to me. I think it's right? But how do we know what they want? Or maybe they want an entirely different thing. So if you're building that product, what's an example where here's something we learned about our customer and here's how we learned it. And that's how we were able to build this funnel for them, which again, of course, is driving all the right stuff for us, but it's for them.
Right. So, I think some of it is first tried and true, like looking at some of the user data, like what the heck are they clicking on, right? So looking at your hot jars and all that stuff, and what are they trying to get to, and how quickly are they moving through, let's say, the more detailed content. If they happen to be from that product perspective, if they're on some of the thought leadership pages and they're spending time there, quite a bit of time, and that's where you offer the right conversion at that kind of moment and say, okay, you're on these thought leadership pages. So that to me is kind of where it happens, Daniel, is like taking your shots at the right places. It's not nearly for everybody. In this case, we're really trying to cater to when the really, really top best person steps through the door and their intent is known. We know what their intent is. How do we honor their time as quickly as we possibly can? And again, and string together from the MarTech perspective, I think you're stringing together different technologies, and you're creating between, let's say, whatever you are on for your web And then if you're using Zapier, in our case, we've got one where if they're down this path and they do want to instantly connect, then what's going to happen is it'll send an indication out to Slack, and we've got a small pod of SMEs who are able to have that conversation. So the bat phone kind of rings, and they could kind of step through. They could click a button and be brought into an interface and have a conversation right then and there if they're ready for it. That doesn't exist. We had to orchestrate together a couple of different things. And like I said, if they don't want the conversation, well, then cool. Let's kick them to a really nice customized Calendly and get them to book. But again, all hopefully with the honor of this is what they want. They want to be served this way. And it's clear because they're taking steps that show us, well, yeah, they're enjoying the fact that they could get to our VP of engineering that quickly if they are the right person. Again, by the way, that's not the majority of people that hit the site. Not even close. Like not at all. However, we really want to cater to those because they are going to be the highest value. They are the ones that can accelerate. And by looking at demand-based data and other things as they come through, we do know pretty quickly, yeah, this person is legitimate. And but between title, between where they work, and I think it behooves both of us if we could speed the clock up, and they don't need to go through an email dance to get to a meaningful conversation.
Sure. And I think the hard thing is to get their attention to begin with, right? And as I
Yes.
mentioned, we really only have a few shots. So I like this lesson. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. I like that. Can you tell us the specific story? Take us into that room where it happened, when this kind of first dawned on you.
Well, yeah. So first and foremost, the saying is from the Cannonball Run. So for those I'm 46, and those that know Dom DeLuise and Burt Reynolds and the Rat Pack, and heck, Jackie Chan's in that movie, if you believe it or not. He's one of the guys in the Subaru. But one of the guys who were driving the truck, they punch the clock and they're about to start their race. And he turns to the guy and he says, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. And the other guy growls and they peel off into the night and start their Cannonball Run race. Definitely suggest you watch that movie. It's Farrah Fawcett. It's a heck of a movie. With that, the philosophy that I take, and then I'll get into a real nice specific one here, Daniel, is we only get so many shots at doing something with, I'd say, like deep focus, doing it really, really well to also help us differentiate, to do it and not just put out, yet another ebook or another blog series, if that's what this is. The example earlier of the documentary is an example of this, that it was like, that could have been a set of videos. It could have been, smaller vignettes. And we went full bore documentary, and it feels, looks, acts, breathes. The thing is a high quality documentary. Cool. That's an example. More recently at NTT Data, I was working with our VP of engineering. His name's Nate Spilson, really smart guy. He's got a lot of we kind of pride ourselves on some strong point of views on how to approach and think through scale, and treating yourself as a platform, even if you're not. You don't need to be Netflix or Amazon to think of yourself as a platform, and technologically wise, treat yourself like a platform, so that when you're trying to do the things that are product focused and you're building new products and new apps and things of that nature, you could do so at like smaller and smaller risk per attempt, because you've set yourself up for like an infrastructure that could absorb change and scale. Cool. So he started writing these long form blog posts about this guy, Nate, right, that I would work with. And he's like, let's do a blog series. Let's get you on the NTT Data podcast, the one we call Launch, that I host. Cool. And I'm reading these long form blogs, and we're like, all right, let's put an ebook together. This is enough to stitch together an ebook. All right, we start putting together an ebook. Sounds perfectly the thing that you do with a high level piece of content. We're putting the ebook together, and I'm like, man, we're up to like 70 pages. I'm like, this is not, and I don't mean with graphics. I'm like, we're up to like 70 pages. I'm like, Nate, why don't we just make this a book? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, he never had done a book. I'm like, Nate, like, dude, you're pretty darn close to being into like full blown. This is a business book. This is both a business and leadership book with a technology lesson as the centerpiece. And so I paired him with an awesome coworker. Her name's Annika, and I was like, "Hey, what if I pair you with a writer that could really dedicate time each and every week to parse this out, get it into a more of a full narrative, and what if we make this what if we go for it and make it a really big book?" Anyway, to hit the fast forward a little bit there for the listeners, Daniel. So it's called Frictionless Enterprise. It's a full book. It's out. You can get it on Amazon. We have physical books, which that tactile thing still matters. It's crushing in market because it's well written. It's deep. It looks beautiful. Of course, we got everything designed, and the interior of it is beautiful. It's so well designed. And then we're looking at him like, hey man, if I come out, he lives close to Detroit. I'm like, hey, if I come out there, would you record an audiobook? He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, dude. I was like, why don't we just go all the way with this? Like, it's hitting in market. So about 6 months ago or so, 8 months ago, flew out to Detroit, spent a couple of days in studio with him, captured it as an audiobook, and then, learned. We didn't know how to put it out an audiobook. We learned like 3 ways not to put out an audiobook, by the way, before we figured out, okay, this is the way, and you got to check all these marks and do these things in a really specific way in order for it to hit all these distribution points. All that being said, this started out as a blog series, but it had the right gravity, and it absolutely, you have to understand what's got the right smarts. Like, is this thing smart? Will it stand out? And not contrarian for the sake of contrarian, but it has its own point of view. It's not what you see in the market yet. And can you do it at a level that's probably going to surprise some people? And that to me is like, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. And that's been a huge success story. That book, I get inundated every single day in a good way. I get Slack pings. Hey, can I get 10 books out to, I can't name companies, Company X. Hey, we've got a CIO meeting coming up. They read they listened to the first couple of chapters. Can we get a couple of signed books this way? Yeah. And then you take it to that next level. He's signing books. We got little cards printed up that go in the packaging. The packaging is now launched by NTT Data when it arrives. We've got our CEO doing handwritten notes that go out with a batch of books. Oh, she's actually our president, I shouldn't say, not CEO, president of launch. It just keeps on becoming a thing that's like, okay, what's the next level of care and marketing you could apply? But it never would have happened if that thing, I don't want to say died, if that thing stopped at, okay, we have a nice blog series, we'll make it an ebook. So that's a really cool one that I think is a good lesson.
So are you Burt Reynolds and Nate is Dom DeLuise, or is it which one of you is the Burt Reynolds character? Which is the Dom DeLuise one?
Oh, you are such a patient man to hold that for that long. I love you. Maybe I'm the mad doctor. I think if anything, I'm the mad doctor inside the van they pick up because I forget why they need a doctor at some point, but they needed one. And that guy's,
I'm exactly 46 too, and I watched Cannonball Run, and I wasn't as big of a fan, but that's the only thing I remember Dom DeLuise from was like that and the Muppets or something like that. I didn't really
right. He was always showing up on the Muppets, right? It's jovial guy for sure.
So I think that was a great example of kind of what you were saying earlier about being a product owner. I mean, I think there you actually built a product, right? So like as I mentioned, I look at a blog as a product, a podcast as a product. You took what could have just been some blog posts and made a product. You said something that really interested me and caught my attention, though, especially from someone who works like deeply in like digital enterprises and digital marketing and all these things. You said you printed a book, you made a book. There's a physical book. You're sending around a physical book. And I love that because I had a case study. I don't want to name the company, but a case study with a company recently that puts out this big report. And they used to put out the report in a digital format and in a printed format. And then maybe a new CMO came in or something, and they didn't like that they didn't get data from the printed format. It kind of really frustrated them because they wanted that data and that customer data, so they got rid of it. But I've always seen that experience, especially as digital has grown, is nothing beats print for credibility and for sticking out. And for example, we've conducted research. We asked a representative sample of all Americans, when you're thinking of making a purchase decision, which advertising do you trust most? And number one at 82% was newspaper ads, and number two at 80% was magazine ads, right? Because
Wow.
print still has credibility. And anyone can throw up a website these days, but if you're kind of sending out that print book. So can you kind of take us through it sounds like you've gotten some good results. I like you're saying the president's sending out letters, you're physically sending this out. Can you take us through the decision to actually do that and how you played in with the trade-offs that I always hear of, like, well, I can't try. In a PDF, I know if they read, or whatever it is, I know if they read until like page 17 in my ebook or whatever,
Right.
but I don't know. Maybe they never even read this thing. Like, how did you manage that trade-off and how did you decide to go in on the printed book?
Yeah. So that's a good question. We operate, so the launch team is fairly small, right? Like I said, manage about a team of 10. And when I say about, that's, I look at, I extend through contractors but they are consistently working with us. So I just don't delineate between an FTE or that woman, Annika, who I mentioned earlier, who helped Nate write the book. She's a contractor. But by the way, she's a contractor by choice. I've tried to hire her for like 10 years. She doesn't want a job. So we do have the freedom, I would say, to make decisions and operate with a budget that's contained, not huge, but enough to go make some of these choices and not have to talk about it with too many people before we make a choice. That's number one. That's not everybody's scenario. So just recognizing that maybe a little simpler to go for it in places where there's not too many cooks in the kitchen. The second thing I would say there's probably three things. The second thing, it was just the spidey sense that it was just getting too big, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to figure out what to cut. It's like, wait, no, that's like, if we want to be an ebook, we got to kind of play this game. Got to be this size. And we were and by the way, it's available digitally. So people do convert digitally as well. And that's totally fine. But the thing for making the decision to go forward and make it a full-on book, but even digitally, it's like we put it out, it's on Amazon, and we put it out as a book. We don't call it an ebook. The overall, like I guess I just wasn't worried about the funnel metrics of it. It just was never the point, I think is what it all boils down to. It was never the point that this thing would be this lead magnet in this way. And then I could build this awesome product that gets you to the author, like I was describing earlier, right? In a product way, super fast. We are doing that because now we have the opportunity to do that. It was always about authority. It was always, always, always about, this is so good and so crisp and different than what we hear out there, which is the spidey sense telling you, do something more with this, that it deserves this extra treatment. And what it does is establishes authority, because like you said, I've got it right here. Like, this thing's physical. This is a pretty sizable book, and it's a physical book. So it does exactly that. It happens to be good. It happens to be beautifully designed. But it was always about that. It was like, hey, when we started launch is like a year and a half old, like launched by NTT Data. It was put together by a combination of different acquisitions and some service lines that existed. So we wanted a bit of a centerpiece, something that had weight to it. And this was a really nice way for us to get something to market that we think would have that weight and open doors in a way that simply a piece of digital is never going to do for you.
I love that. It's got that funk factor. So just a moment, we're going to talk about some lessons from people you made those things with, right? We just talked about some things you made, like actually making a book. That's something you got to make in marketing. Just a moment, we'll talk about lessons from some of the people you made them with. But first, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MECLabs AI, the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa. Right now, you can get a free 3-month full scholarship to the AI Guild and a free quick start AI productivity kit at join.meclabsai.com to help you navigate the artificial intelligence marketing revolution. That's join.meclabsai.com. All right, let's take a look at some people you collaborated with. Your first lesson is trust great creative people. You learned this from Sandika, and this was a documentary you were talking about before, the gig economy documentary. So I think we have a good understanding what that documentary was. What I'd really like to do is take us into the room where it happened, take us behind the scenes. You're making this, I think this gentleman, I assume this gentleman was in Indonesia. I
Yep.
assume you were not in Indonesia. It's difficult enough to manage creatives when we're together looking at each other. So can you give us just maybe like one tactic you used to help manage the creative for this project to make sure that one, it was like you said, visually appealing and beautiful, but two, it got across the value proposition you were trying to get across?
Yeah, this is so all those assumptions are correct. He and his wife operate a company, and I think they're called Overloops, and they're awesome. They'll travel the world, and they were actually out at our event in Miami, and they did all our video for that just 2 months ago. So they're awesome people and deserve the love. And they're designers and great videographers and amazingly fast and sharp editors. With all that, no, I'm not in Indonesia, and we had a designer from Turkey who was going to be part of this. We had a gentleman who was a Russian algorithmist who was living in Spain who was going to be part of this. We had an American who was going to be part of this, but not near me, who were going to be like the stars of this documentary. So the trust part was very much like, look, you still script, quote unquote, a documentary. You know what the arc you want to go tell. That's the scripting in that particular case. Of course, you're not telling people what to say. I mean, you could, but that's not what we were doing. But you are scripting an overarching story and an arc that you want to reach. The huge trust factor is when you're working with great designers and great creatives is that's usually enough. So it doesn't have to be a documentary. Like, back away, let them go do the things that they're awesome at. I'm fairly creative, but I'm not a great designer, but I could go in and, do some drag and drop stuff and play around. But nowhere near the level these experts are going to do. So trust experts. So he's around capturing all these different interviews and kept capturing people in their environment in real life. And we just have to trust that he's getting good stuff. I had worked with him previously. I know he's good. And we have to just give guardrails, give strong guidance, but then let go. Allow them to do their thing. Most often they're going to come back. If they're good, they're going to come back with something that delights you, blows you away.
No, I mean, I like what you're saying. I'm a creative too. I love when I'm given that free reign. But also, in fairness, sometimes what comes back isn't what it should be. Sometimes you're dealing with more junior people. They don't have it yet. I
Sure.
was doing a interview recently, and they're saying one of the things that you need in marketing is resilience. It's important not just for marketing, but for your mental health, right? Because you're going to have a lot of at-bats and you're going to strike out. And I've presented many creative ideas that didn't work well. So can you give us a sense? Tell me a specific example, it could be from this documentary or from something else, where you got work back from a creative and it wasn't right, and they are a creative and you do want to nurture them and get their best stuff, but it just wasn't the right value proposition or whatever. How did you give them feedback? What did you do? Because, for example, when I talked to Marco Mueller, the CMO of Aviva, on How I Made It Marketing, one of his lessons was you can make a big career and still stay human, right? And this is a challenge, and sometimes in corporations, as you grow in leadership, you lose your humanity. And he told me this great story about how he was running the Russia region for SAP. The overall CMO of all SAP, one of the biggest software companies in the world, comes to Moscow for this event. It just happened Moscow that day had something else going on. Traffic was horrible. They couldn't get a helicopter. They end up taking this guy into the Moscow subway, which is like super hot. It's a security nightmare. And the guy was awesome about it. Like, Marco was like, I thought I was going to lose my job. I was early in my career. The guy was awesome. He gave great feedback. And Marco was like, then told me, he's like, this is how I need to be. I can grow in my career. He manages like 250 people at Aviva now. He's like, I got to keep my humanity. And that can be hard too, when you're giving feedback to creatives, when, you're under deadline pressure, you're under performance pressure. They're not delivering the right thing, but they have this separate creative vision. So take us to a specific example. How do you give a feedback to a creative and to kind of nudge it back on track?
So I've had I'd say luck, because I think this one is luck, that I stumbled into crowdsourcing as a platform. And so that platform, we would put out design competitions, and then you would get back revs from like maybe, let's say, 6 high quality designers doing something in parallel. So you are forced to get good at giving really clear feedback and doing it concisely, because you can't do it at volume if you're not confident or being fuzzy with your direction. So that shaped I just say in general, practice is the best way to say it, because it could feel icky. You could feel like I don't want to hurt someone's feelings about something that they just poured their heart and mind into. and their craft into. So the environment I was in, this one's really kind of like an environment thing. It was just like, hey, no, we have guidance and templates on how to give high quality human feedback that still stays on the positive, but calls out very specific things. So that's number one, by the way. Don't ever give a creative, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, just don't do that to them. Like, well, why? Like what? And more importantly, specifically, being as specific as you can. It might feel like it's the wrong way. It's not. It's not the wrong way. If you want them to understand your feedback, which is I think number one, like good communications, for them to understand it, be specific. Say, this is what's not hitting for me. And if you can, if you have enough time, try to give enough examples of other things you've seen. They're like, hey, but this is not hitting, but hey, the way Apple, whatever, just pulling out one of the best brands of all time, right? The way Apple or Nike or whoever, or Airbnb, the way they treated this new campaign, that's the kind of tone I really want to hit with this visual. Can you get us more towards that? And then, but also don't over dictate in your feedback, because then you're back to square one where you're trying to control a creative. If you're constricting folks who are designers, or really, let's just talk about designers. If you're really trying to control designers and push pixels, you're going to get back crap, and they're going to hate you. They're going to hate you as a client. They will not want to work with you again. So there's that balance there, Daniel. It's just a matter of be specific, try to call out very line item things that you think could be better. Try to provide examples, but then understand to back away again. And by the way, if you're continuously not getting what you want from that particular designer, well, then that person's probably not, there's some wavelength things that are probably not clicking there. And that's okay. There's a ton of talent out there.
Yeah, to reference another 80s movie, since we're the same age, we used to joke around, it's like Ghost. You remember that scene in Ghost where like they put their hands together and they're making the pot? Like if you feel like you're doing that with the designer, like your hand is over the designer's hand on that mouse, that's probably a little too much feedback, right? But one thing that I've always found that was helpful to me as a creative, but that I've always found trying giving feedback is start with questions, ask questions. And one of the things I would always ask is, creativity is all about choices. So take us through this choice you made. Why did you choose that color? Why did you choose that font? Why did you choose with that length? Whatever it is, take us through those choices. And the choices tend to be two things. One, they're an assumption about the customer, right? Which is why I was asking her, like, tell me something you learned about the customer. It's an assumption about the customer. And that's when you can talk about, okay, is that assumption correct or is it not correct, right? Or the other thing is, which is worse, is it's not an assumption about the customer. So the thing that I hate when I hear is like, why'd you do this? Oh, because I like this. I like short copy. I like long copy. I like this. I like that. And it's like, okay, well, our customer is a senior citizen buying a bathtub because they don't want to fall and break their hip. You're 25 years old and skateboard on the weekend. So I think that's great. You like that, but I don't honestly care. I care what the customer likes. So let's figure out what the customer likes and then use your design or whatever creative ability to deliver on that. But you mentioned crowdsourcing, and I want to bring that up because this really ties into your next example of crowdsourcing isn't just for designers. This was crowdsourcing for data scientists, which I thought was kind of cool. Your lesson was, don't be afraid to let the deep work be the star. And you learned this from Albert Lin, and I think also in a roundabout way, you learned it from Genghis Khan as well. So why don't you tell us how you learned this lesson from Albert and Genghis?
I will. The other piece of what you just said, which I have to hop in on too, is making sure that from a brand operation standpoint, some of the things you're saying about, hey, why'd you choose this? Why, what was this going on? Like that also could be, it could be a symptom of, is your design system in place? Do you have a strong brand book? Have you done the work to say, hey, this is our brand. Go learn it. This is our system. These are our colors. It's just a way to also give a lot more clarity to say, okay, these are the rules of the road. Still go be creative, but these are the rules of the road. These are the types of imagery we typically select. We like our copy short, or no, we like to have long prose. To me, that's an important piece, especially, by the way, if you're working with contractors. If you're not working with someone who's in your day to day, giving them that and be like, get around this. Otherwise, they're going to be off in La La Land doing stuff that might be cool, but it's not the right voice or even colors, right? So that's just one tactical lesson too, is like, hey, get that design system in place.
Well,
If you're
I'm
gonna
glad you
own,
mentioned that, because another thing I
yeah,
always bring, I mean, you're talking about designer is also, more of a writer, but is having that
yeah,
value proposition, especially when it's a contractor. Because sometimes I've seen, and I've been on the receiving end of this, I've seen, asking designers or copywriters, or especially when they're contractors, to do a certain thing when they don't have the specifics around it, right? Like,
right,
okay, on this page, show a table of how we're better than the three best alternatives, go for it. It's like, well, how are you? You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, we need those,
right,
specifics. And so many
correct,
times we get back this kind of general generic work because we're only giving general generic input. That's why I mentioned design
right,
briefs before, where you need those specifics. So, okay, they're using their creativity for the best thing they can. What is the best way to show this with design? What is the best way to explain this with copy? You're
yes,
the VP of marketing, you're the marketing manager, you're the director of marketing, and you understand what the value proposition, how it is you compare to the competitors, what the specifics are, what are the proof points, what are the evidentials, and all of those
yeah.
things.
Yeah. So
Um,
tying it back to crowdsourcing, it was I learned to write specs for people that don't know me from Adam yet, or my company from Adam yet, that are hopping in to do something. Or we were running crowdsourcing competitions for brands. So we had to prepare that and be like, you need to know this. Otherwise, you're going to be way off the mark. And why waste your time? You're trying to win a competition or place. Um, so that was another lesson that, hey, that's just kind of a best practice, and it becomes part of what you do, which gets you consistent results, which is really, really important because there's not so many hours in the day. And you mentioned crowdsourcing and this data science competition. So Albert Lin, if people Google Albert Lin and just put like Explorer Albert Lin in there, you're going to find out this guy's like a legit, very legit, National Geographic, whatever you want to call it. License is the wrong term, but part of Nat Geo World Explorer. He's also a professor out at UC San Diego. He also lost half his leg a couple of years ago, and he's still out there doing amazing things. With that, he was also mashing up at the time, mashing up this idea of using crowdsourcing to go hunt for the lost tomb of Genghis Khan. And that also means interesting technologies at play as well. And because they believe it's in Mongolia, and believe it or don't, the Mongolian government doesn't want people poking around all their land, just going to search for a lost tomb of probably one of the most famous people, well, certainly one of the most famous people and most important people in human history in terms of impact. Um, so they had to figure out a couple of different things and different technologies and using geospatial data, and how they could do this in a non-invasive manner. Okay, so you've got these gigantic data sets. Cool, this geospatial data. And then they're using this new computer vision technologies to tag certain things the way they look from a space satellite imagery to be like, is that man-made? Is that nature made? If it is man-made, does it look like a tomb? And they were using, different X-ray vision to go into the earth with this stuff. High tech. They used the crowdsourcing element to say, we want to develop algorithms to search this gigantic geospatial database and this imagery database to quickly understand which of all these imageries we're taking. Mongolia is pretty freaking big. Which one of these are likely man-made, and they check the boxes imagery-wise of buried tombs, things that look like tombs, and then they start piecing together and narrowing down sets of what could be. By the way, he believes he found it. He can't dig where he thinks it is, but based on everything he believes he has found it. With that, when we were getting this amazing story ready for market, the story's really cool, right? We're searching for Genghis Khan, we're the lost tomb. We are doing, we're using high tech. It is this cool crowdsourcing competition, but the lesson to attract the talent, we were still trying to attract data science algorithmists, was yes, they were the hook maybe got them in because we put out a YouTube video and we did some cool splash pages. And Albert Lin is this cool Nat Geo explorer. Cool. They, at the end of the day, cared about how difficult of a data science challenge is this. Is this thing friggin'? Of course, there's prize money. So yeah, put the prize money out there and put that out there certainly to get folks aware. But once they get into the platform to go look at, can I go solve this? They want to know how difficult and how cool of a challenge this is, how much of a challenge this is. So the big lesson there was, while we got all this cool story, we always have to remember who the heck was the audience? Who are we trying to get in? Yes, we're trying to get this out so PR will go cover it. And guess what? They did anyway because it was cool. And we had a microsite and, we did a YouTube video to introduce it. Cool. But to get the gravitational pull, and we got I think it was at that point, 600 to 700 different data algorithmists around the world to come compete in parallel on this competition. And then we're testing their algorithms in real time and showing them how they're doing versus their peers. That had to be the star for that audience. And it was a big lesson, man, that if you over rotate on the wrong thing, it could be the coolest thing in the world. It won't matter to who you're trying to actually get to do something of value.
Yeah, that's a great thing. But so tell me specifically, because it's less important that specific thing there. Tell me specifically, how did you find the right thing? You are not a data algorithmist. So can you take us into a specific example with that of what is a tactic you did to learn what they wanted and then it didn't come off as phony? So for example, when I talked to Tara Robertson, the chief marketing officer for Bitly on How I Made It in Marketing, one of her lessons was marketing shouldn't be about driving demand. It's about driving value. And one of the ways she does that, what she looks for in the data is not what do people want to do. She takes a step back and tries to learn from the data. Why did they want to do it? And that's what drives what she does to create value. So what did you do? How did you, learn? This is what, you're saying it very emphatically now and very confident. I appreciate that. But how did you actually get with data algorithmists and say, what do they want and what wouldn't come off as phony to them?
So just like getting around great designers, it's the same thing, right? So it is bringing Top Coder was not just about code. There was designers, there was algorithmists. So members of the community, when I was there, they also are the ones who help write the competition. They help set up the testing harnesses, what they call a testing harness. So you can go in and play with different, ideas and algorithms and throw them into a system real quick to get back feedback. So you're working with experts is what it boils down to. There was no way at all I could hop in and be authentic there. It would come off as absolute BS and they would be out. They'd be out because they just wouldn't do what they expect also. So their interface when they hit the thing is a lot different than, what the splash page looks like that we're also shopping to PR agencies, of course, to say, hey, you should cover this. It's a really cool thing. It's just about, I think, the same lesson, but on repeat. In this case, swap out designers for actual data scientists who could go in there and say, yes, this is how you talk about this type of challenge. This is how you frame how we're going to apply computer vision. I can't even go into some of the vernacular details on it, but they could, right? But they could. And so then those keywords and those things show up in the internal pages. And when they hit the platform, that you're speaking their language. You have to be authentic to them. Otherwise they're out. They're never going to go tinker and see if they could move the needle here and go write the next algorithm that does this really cool thing to help, search this database with new computer vision. So a little bit of, second verse, same as the first there, that it is going into experts and letting them do their thing while you still understand the whole orchestration around it. And I think that's really the lesson there.
Yeah, I mean, there's golden communities for sure. We're out of time, Clinton, but before I let you go, let me ask you, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
Yeah, so more and more and more and more is internal communications. It is so much, again, as you scale your career and you take on larger things and you have big ideas and you want to act like a grizzly, you got to win internally. You have to be able to build consensus, bring people with you, along with you. You have to collaborate and figure out ways to understand what might be in your way, people or process or a combination of those things, and get them either on your side or at least not a detractor, hopefully on your side and really being part of it. So being very open with how you collaborate on net new big ideas and not bringing something fully baked. This is a big lesson I've learned fairly recently too. if you bring something completely baked and the person you're trying to get to do this with you has a good creative, spirit in their body too, they may love it. They also may resent you for like not inviting them in earlier. So it's like, hey, you resist the urge to be like, oh, I could get this to near perfection. I could get this thing to be, I'm going to spin it up in Figma and it's going to show them exactly what it's going to do. Maybe, but know who are you trying to get on your side? Who are you trying to internally communicate to that you want not just their buy-in, but you want them like rowing with you. So you accelerate and not just definitely don't want to decelerate, but maybe staying stagnant's not good enough either. Maybe you need their power to move this forward, whether they're a boss or just a peer that you need to row with. Understand who they are and maybe bring them something a little less formed, a little bit more wet clay, if we can get back to our righteous brothers ways here, man, and bring that instead and see how they contribute and how they react to that. You do that internally and you build, you end up having a lot of success. I realize that might not be a marketing lesson per se. However, when you're trying to bring new big marketing ideas to market that are different, to me, this is the thing that keeps coming up in my career is how well do I bring people together internally to do the biggest things? Because that's when I get more opportunity.
Yeah, get people involved early in the journey. And thank you for taking us through your career journey here, Clinton. I think we all learned a lot.
Well, Daniel, you're a great host, a gracious host, and I appreciate how you guided it too. So thanks a ton.
And thank you for everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.